Good morning, Rabbi Isai. Lilu Nishmasimi Merossi Ruspas Mordechai, Chalamoid Pesach in Mundaline. Today is Daf Mem Vav. So I wanted to show you first a picture of Yisroel Shalitsky. Hi, Eli, big Talmud and fan here. Shkoyach found Yisroel hustling away, signing guys up in the middle of the hotel lobby. And here you have, believe it or not, Shlomi Klein look-alike in the hotel. I don't know his name. He says he's Sephardi and from the Five Towns. Moed Rebelli, you mentioned that the husband of the Yevamos is her ex-husband. You weren't sure what the correct word is. He believes the correct word is a late husband. But anyways, he says at the bottom, from a Bobover student, where we don't learn English that well, but we do learn math. The Olam should know that in Bobover they learn math. What's his name? Isaac Steinberg. Chaim Kessler wound up today in American Dream Mall in New Jersey. Now, of course, whoever goes to the mall is not going shopping because that would be a problem because Chalamoid is really Yontif. That's what we discussed the entire year. Yontif. People don't go to work. I was very proud to see my cousin, who's my snowboard partner. He's here in the hotel. He's a surgeon, and he took off the whole entire Chalamoid Sukkos, and he's taking off the whole Chalamoid Pesach. He's not working. He took basically most of his vacation days just not to work on Chalamoid. One of them today in American Dream Mall in New Jersey, we passed the store Zara. I told my wife what it was. Previously, she asked me how I knew. I explained to her that the Five-Town lady has the bag. Again, she gave me a look only a wife could give. The Daf, Rebelli's pictures, somehow I think that I will not be living this down for a long time. All the best. Chaim Kessler. The sponsor for the Koil of the month is Anonymous and Zechus of Hillel ben Saradino, Rivko Basfego, the Shibzeicha, Tezer Shel Kayoma. Parnas HaChodesh, the last day. Wow, that was long. I thought that was shorter than that. I guess Reb Chaim was nifter a long time ago. By the Bresler, again, this is the story where the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Yisroel Meir Druck, when he found out that Reb Chaim Kanievsky was nifter, he was probably the closest man to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, besides the family. So when he found out Reb Chaim Kanievsky was nifter, and I think they asked him to speak, whatever the story was, he fell down and had a heart attack. And he was in a very, very bad condition. Therefore, the Austein family, the Bresler, Austein, Rosenberg, Schulman, and Tobias families donated the month, Parnas HaChodesh, the Zechus, Refuah Shlema for Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yisroel Meir, Dovid, Yocheved, Druck, Shlita, and Baruch Hashem, as I mentioned, I think last night, you see, it seems like he's feeling much better. You see that he interviewed for the article in the Ami, a very nice, long article. Parnas HaChodesh by the Lock and Lebovic families, Lakewood NJ, because Torah is the best. This is Gula. Parnas HaChodesh. Chodesh Nisan sponsored by Yoli, Lirishmas Dov Pinchas Ben Moshe Yakov Shalom Lirishmas Rucham Chai Fraiman Dov Pinchas Aleh Shalom Lirishmas Yichil Shragam and Abraham Alevi Aleh Shalom. Parnas HaChodesh. Ahron Fraiman l'Zechus Parnosin Siyat Shmaya and continue that stuff to Rebelli and the Chain l'Reb Ahron Fraiman he should have Zechus Parnosin Siyat Shmaya and continue that Tzlacha and Nachas and Gesund and all the great stuff. Parnas HaChodesh as Zechus to Aaron's Hatzlacha and to you, the Magid Shir, and the video editor for Hatzlacha and continuation, and not missing a Shir, and L'Zech Nishmas Rabbi Yitzchok ben Yamin, and Rabbi Isai, happy birthday to Ezra Leyton. Okay. All right, Rabbi Isai, here we go. The bottom of Mem Hey Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Again, one of the easier dapim. We had a series of easy dapim. Tomorrow as well is going to be from the easier ones. If all of Yevamos was this easy, would be just like Megillah and Chagiga. Omar Rav Chama bar Gurya. Omar Rav. It seems like at the end they say that you really don't lose money, but it seems like you could go buy a slave, and the slave, the Eved, could pull off a big shtick. And you thought that you're buying yourself something worth $20,000, $30,000, and you pay for it, and all your money goes to waste. Now, like I said, the Eved himself would have to pay you, I think, but it seems like he could pull off a big shtick. You thought you had an Eved here? No. You went to the marketplace where The guy is selling another guy, but he did a trick. What's the trick? He jumped into the mikvah. You said, okay, let's go to the mikvah, and let's make sure that, not obviously, but the halacha is, in order to have an Eved Knani, you must be toivel him, and you must give him a bris milah. And then he takes upon himself some of the mitzvahs like a woman, like a isha. So when he was toivel, he said in his mind, right, Yiddishkeit is about the kavanah that you have. So he had kavanah, v'tavel Hashem ben chayr. So, I'm not being toivel to be an Eved. I already have a bris milah. I'm going to be a Yid. Kana atzmoi ben chayrin. So he pulled off a big shtick. He's no longer an Eved. He is free, and he's a regular Yid. My timer, top of Memvav Amud Aleph. A guy cannot acquire another human being. You can't own a slave. So what does the non-Jew own? Whatever he owns, the peiros, the produce that he can produce. That's the only thing that he gives over to the Jew. And since he jumped in, when he went into the mikvah, he had intent to be free. So he was mafkia, he undid whatever shibud he had on him to the Rava. Hegdish, chometz, v'shichrur. I just did my own little thing here. Let's see if it works. Hegdish, chometz, and shichrur. I just like the cartoon of the Eved. So that's why I put it in. Chometz is not bad. So what do you have? You have 3 items here. You have a guy who made an apoitiki. Apoitiki is a combination of words. Apoi, right over here, tehei koi. Apoitiki. Basically, he owes money. I borrow money from somebody, and I tell him, look, you see this slave that I own? I'm going to pay you back either cash, and if not, you have a shibud, you will own this slave. It's $20,000. Here you go. Or, you see this store full of chametz? I'm going to give it to you. Or, do you see this bull? Bull we said is worth $2,000, something like that. Be'erach. I'm going to give you this shard. What does he do? He takes the bull and he makes the bull hegdish for the mizbeach. He says this is going to be a carbon. And that carbon is mafkia the shibud. It removes all the obligations that he had before to an individual. So rather than it be going to the guy that he owes money, now that bull is going to go to the mizbeach. Pulled off a shtick. This chametz is now Erev Pesach. We're talking about Pesach here. Pesach. Erev Pesach comes. You as a Jew cannot own the chametz. So is mafkia the shibud. There's no more apoitiki. There's no more obligation to pay the other guy with this chametz because it's not your chametz anymore. You have to be mafkir it. And the same thing with a slave. The $20,000 that I have obligated to you, that you are counting on, and you think you're going to have that money in the slave, I just released him. I was meshachar the slave. So therefore, I have no more apoitik anymore. So nachamal. Hegdish, chometz, v'shichrur, these 3 things on the screen, mafkin midei shibud. When I make my shar hegdish, when Pesach arrives and it becomes chometz, and when I release my eved, those 3 things are able to remove any kind of obligation those 3 items have to another individual. Says the Gemara, Maser Rav Chizda, Maisiv Bloria Hagioires. There's a story with Mrs. Bloria. She was a convert. She was a Gioires. She was in the process of becoming a Gioires. Right before she was able to be toivel for Geros, her avodim figured this out. They're shtikmachers, and they were toivel themselves to release themselves. Too bad, Mrs. Gloria. You lost all your slaves. They bought themselves back by them being toivel. See, she always prevented them. She knew they know the halacha. She prevented them from going to the mikvah. Now she said, okay, let's go to the mikvah to be misgayer. And so they said, okay, let's go. Not to be misgayer, to be avodim. And they went and they were misgayer and they were kind of themselves. So but the Gemara asks a question from here. It seems like lefanea. It's because they went to the mikvah right before she did. And she wasn't Jewish yet. So they pulled a shtick when she wasn't a Jew. But it seems like once she was Jewish, they wouldn't be able to pull shtick. Amar Rav, not true. It's a nice diuk, but it's not accurate. There is a diuk here, he says. There's something that you can infer, but not completely like you're saying. If she's not Jewish yet, then anytime they go to the mikvah, even if they don't have kavanah mefurish, they are released as Jews. But once she becomes a yid, they have to specify, they have to say, going to the mikvah in order to become Jewish. And then they are released. But regardless, before she became a giyaris, after she became a giyaris, anytime they go to the mikvah and they have kavanah to be misgayer, then they become gerim. Now the question is, Rabbi Isai, if any time a slave could just dunk in the mikvah and think to himself, hey, I'm doing this to become a Jew, and he goes out free, so how in the world can you ever buy a slave? Every slave will have that kavanah. So the Gemara deals with that in a moment. And for that, Rabbi Isai, we have a beautiful picture, special, hot off the press. I got it 10 minutes before Shir from our famous artist, Yoshi. Omer Rav Avia. Lo yishanu elo b'lo yikeach meno ovid kechavim. Says Rav Avia, this shtick that a slave could be toivel himself and become a yid, that's only if you buy it from another guy. But that's if you buy it from the marketplace. Like the bad guys in the 1800s, sell slaves, take a slave, sell a slave, break up families, all this crazy stuff they used to do. But if you go ahead and you buy a slave from himself, he needs to make cash, he wants to provide for his family, so he sells himself. Then he cannot pull off the shtick. He can't say, okay, here, give me $20,000 and I'll become your slave. I understand I have to go to the mikvah, let's go to the mikvah. And as he jumps in the mikvah, he says, I'm jumping in to become a yid. That doesn't work. Because it says in the pasuk, check this pasuk out. This is kedai to see. I just threw this in here to get some context of what's going on here. There's two psukim here, pasuk mem dal, pasuk mem hey. So in the first pasuk it says you can buy a slave from the goyim that surround you. And then in pasuk mem hey it says v'gam mibnei atoshavim hagorim imachem mehem tiknu. So the question is, why is there a double lashon here? Why does it say mehem tiknu twice? And therefore the Gemara is able to learn from it. Atem koinim mehem veloy heim koinim mikem. Tells you mehem, you are purchasing an evet from them, but not them from you. Veloy heim koinim zeh mizeh. And therefore a non-Jew cannot purchase an evet from another non-Jew. Veloy heim koinim mikem lemai. And what does it mean that they cannot purchase from you? What does it mean a guy cannot buy a Jewish slave? If it means that it's only referring to he can't even buy the produce that he produces, what? Why not? Why can't a non-Jew purchase that? It says before in the pasuk, meaning that you sold yourself to a mishpacha of a ger. You sold yourself to a guy. So what did you sell? The minimum that you were able to sell is your ma'aseh yadayim, is your produce. So obviously you could sell produce to a guy. It means that a Jew cannot sell his body. The guy cannot own him. He can't own the whole Yisroel. So what does it say? It says the guy cannot buy you, but you could purchase him. Well, this still doesn't tell me that through tefillah alone, maybe it means that he purchased him with money and tefillah. two things. So how do you know? You still don't know that if he gave the guy just money alone, that he cannot be toivel l'shum. Maybe if he purchased him with money, just money, then the Jew could jump in the mikveh and think to himself, I'm toivel l'shem gerus, to become a yid. Maybe this is what it says over here, that you purchase him is because he did two things. It was money and tefillah. But if he just bought him with money, maybe he could do the tefillah and do the shtik kashi. Amar Shmuel. Listen to this, Rabbi Isai. You need to force the slave, the eved, when you're purchasing him, you have to force him in the water. Because if you don't force him in the water, what happens is he's going to have kavana and get out of it and say, I'm using the water to become a ger. How do you become a ger? By doing tvila, mila, tvila. He already had mila, and now he's going and he's toiveling himself for gerus. But if you could control him in the water, you control him, then he cannot have kavana that he's doing it for becoming a yid. Then he's stuck being an eved. Ki hai de minyamin avdi de Ravashi. So Gemara says a story. There was a slave, his name was Minyamin. He was the slave of Ravashi. Boilat bule. He wanted to do tefillah. Now Ravashi was very well aware. He wrote this Gemara, Ravashi, right? Ravina Ravashi wrote Shas. So obviously he knows the halacha, Ravashi, that a slave could have kavana for geros. So he wanted to make sure it doesn't happen. So he gave it to his partner Ravina, who also wrote Shas. And to another Amoira. You better make sure that this slave doesn't pull off any foile shtick, any monkey business, because if he does and he goes out free, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to go to you and sue you. So what do? Ramule arviso b'tzavare. They tied a leash to his neck. Arpule v'tzamtzule. Rabbi Isai, I have a picture. Here it goes. Here's Ravina and Ravacha Berei the Rava. They tied a leash to his neck, and they controlled him in the water. So now the Eved can no longer think, I'm being toivel to l'shem gerus. You're not toivel for anything. I'm being toivel you. I'm controlling you in the mikvah. And what do? Arpulei v'tzimtzulei. They were able to release the choke that they had on him so that the water could get in there. As the Gemara is going to explain in a second, there shouldn't be a chatzitza. V'tzimtzulei, then they made it tight. Arpu v'tzimtzulei. Arpulei ke'echad eloi levi chatzitza. They made it loose so that the water could get through the rope. V'tzimtzulei, and they made it nice and tight. They were worried. Hey, they didn't want to get sued by Ravashi. Ravashi said, I'm going to sue you. So they made sure they did it the best way possible. At the end of the day, la halacha, they probably could just say to the Eved, we are being toivel you l'shem avdos and not l'shem gerus, and then he can't. But they wanted to make sure 100%. They took a leash. Shalom Yisroel. By the way, the word takfei b'mayim, that they forced him in the water. Rabbi Yankel Galinsky says a story. He says that when he was a bacher, he wanted to work on his bitachon. And not being scared in the craziest, scariest situations. So he devised an amazing plan. He figured, okay, I'm going to go to the Chaver Kadisha at night, in the middle of the night, and I'm going to sneak in there, and I'm going to go into the mikvah and be toivel in the mikvah of the dead, the Tahara mikvah. Can't get any grosser than that. So he tiptoes into the Chaver Kadisha, and he goes into the mikvah, and he gets into the mikvah, and he feels a human being in the bottom of the mikvah. So he jumps out of the mikvah, and he runs home. He runs to Yeshiva, shaking like a leaf. He couldn't believe it. And he gets to his room, and his chavrusa tells him, you're not going to believe this. I'm petrified. I snuck into the Tahara mikveh tonight, and I was trying to get out, and this dead guy, he jumped on me and wouldn't let me out. He forced me under the water. Okay, anyway, I guess it's a Ma'aseh Shkamataya. He likes to say the story, not anymore because he was nifter, but that's one of his stories. Okay, Zog the Gemara. I mean, nobody could say that it didn't happen because we weren't there. It's back in Russia, whatever. Okay. Bahadei the Doli Reishe Mimayo. Listen to this. As he pulled his head out of the mikvah, Anchulei Zulta the Tina Reisha. They put a bucket of cement on his head. Check this out, we have a picture. Rabbi said we have a picture. Here, this is a cement mixer. They put a cement mixer on his head. And they told him, Zil amte lebe marach. Take this cement mixer, take this bucket of cement, and bring it to your master. In other words, they didn't want to leave him for a millisecond where he should think to himself, I am doing this l'shem cherus, l'shem Yiddishkeit. You should know, you're a slave through and through. Here you go. In a half hour, my shver is walking into this room and he's giving a shir. So we got to get out of here. Chazim mar hani debei papa bar abo the have zuzil inche lichragayu umishav debu. Rabbi Isai, we have something similar today in America, where if you don't pay your taxes, your real estate taxes, they auction it off and people go and they pay the taxes for you and they basically get a lien on your house and eventually the house becomes theirs. It's a big business. You don't pay taxes, you can lose your house. So something similar, not exactly, but in those days there was tax per person. And if you couldn't afford the taxes, then the king would allow other people to pay the taxes for you, and then you had to work that off. You became that person's slave. But it's not a real slave, like you own his body. Or maybe it is. And the Gemara is going to say that it is, but it seems like as soon as, let's say you owe $1,000 to the king, you work $1,000 for this guy that paid your taxes, and then you go free. The Avazuzalinche, for taxes, and the king says this is okay. Kinafki, when they go out, why do they go out? Because they worked it off. Are they complete slaves where they need a get shichr? Or no, they finish $1,000, that moment, they go out free. This is a very beautiful lashon that we can learn a lot from this. If I would have died today without you asking me, then I would have never had the chance to tell you. So you see a few things. First of all, don't hesitate to ask. Always ask. And always give over the information that you have. You don't know if you're the only person that heard this from this Choshev Rav, from this Choshev Rebbe, and you're hiding it inside. It's a terrible thing. You're going to go to your grave with it. So what did he hear? Hachi Amar Rav Sheshes. This is what Rav Sheshes says. Markayu dahani betifsa de malka manach. These slaves, I wanted to make another picture, but Yoshi didn't have. What's that? This phone is in the shop. Thank you. Great, thanks. So the king owns you to the point, like you're in his box, you're in his chest. Says the Gemara, I thought it'd be a cool picture of like a slave with his feet hanging out of the box, head this way. I found the picture, but today with the everybody's politically correct when it comes to slavery and everything, so I didn't want to show that picture. But anyway, you get the idea of what I found. Says the Gemara, in other words, the king owns you. We're talking about Dina de Malchusa Dina. The government has a right. They in their government, they said that this is the rule. So our halacha is going to go by their rules. Dina de Malchusa Dina. And the government said that they are a full slave, the non-Jewish government. So then they are your full slave. And if they're your full slave, you have to give them a letter of freedom, whatever it is, a get shichr. Umalka Omar, Mandaloyov Kroga. The king said, whoever doesn't pay up his taxes, Mishtabed Mandaloyov Kroga, will become Meshubed. His body becomes his to the guy that paid the taxes. Says the Gemara, Reb Chia Barabo Ikla Legavla. Reb Chia showed up in Gavla. Chazal, listen to this. He met women, B'nois Yisroel, the Ma'abra, Megerim, Shemolu V'loi Tavlu. So we're going to have a whole sugya. Actually, we're going to have 3 shitas. In order to become a ger, what do you need? One shita says you need mila alone. The other shita says you need tvila alone, just to be toivel. And the third shita says you need both of them. You need tvila and mila. So he finds these women that are already pregnant from gerim that only did one of the two, only did bris mila, but didn't do tvila. V'chazo chamra de Yisroel, and he saw wine, Jewish wine. The mazgi oivgik chavim v'shos Yisrael, we see all over Shas, the idea of miziga means to dilute the wine. In those days, the wine was very strong. They would add a third of water, whatever it was, to dilute it and make it drinkable. Now, what is that? We know that as yain nesach. V'chaza turmisin the shalki oivgik chav, and he saw these beans, these turmisin right over here, that the goyim were cooking. What is that called? Bishulakom l'chayra. V'lei omar lu v'lei midi. He didn't want to say anything. He didn't want to make a macha. Also, the Rabbi Yochanan, yes, Rabbi Yochanan. Omar lei. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Tzeva achrei zavaneim shem mamzer." Go back and announce that since those goyim that became yidden didn't do the whole process according to Rabbi Yochanan, they are mamzerim according to Rabbi Yochanan. Like we had the whole machlokes yesterday. We passing at the end that they're kosher, but Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that a goy who has relations with the yid, the child is a mamzer. Now, what is yain nesach? Yain nesach is if a non-Jew touches the wine, we have to be concerned that by him touching it, he had intent for avodah zara. But this is not the same thing. This he poured the wine. This is called koichai. It's his power, but he didn't touch it. So Midaraisa it's for sure not yain nesach. But I'm telling you that we were geyser even on that, even on pouring. You have to say that it's yain nesach. And the reason I'm telling you that cooking the beans is considered bishul akum, lefisha einam b'nei Torah. That one alone, just the last one, the third one, turmisin, is because they are amaratzim. Let's not explain to them that turmisin is a different type of food, like we're going to see in a second. All foods, any type of food, a guy should not be cooking for you. Al b'neim shem mamzerim. Rabbi Yochanan Tamei, Rabbi Yochanan holds Rabbi Chia Barabam, Rabbi Yochanan Loilam, Ein Ger Achi Yomel V'Yitbal. Rabbi Yochanan holds you need both Tvila and Mila. V'Kivin the Loy Tavel, since he didn't do the second thing, Oivik Chavemu, he's considered a non-Jew. Rabbi Yochanan, Oivik Chavim, Ve'Rabal Bas Yisrael is what we had yesterday. If a non-Jew has a relationship with a Jew, Avlad Mamzer. So Mela, according to Rabbi Yochanan, all those pregnant women are carrying Mamzerim. And their wine is yain mishum lech amrin nazira, a famous line in Shas that one should do anything it can do to avoid averis. So if you're a nazir, you are refraining from wine, you're letting your hair grow. Don't go close to a vineyard. Don't go close to a bar. Basically, don't go close to the closet where you have all the liquor. You got to stay away. Lech amrin nazira. They tell the nazir, get out of here, get out of here. Schar, go around and around. Don't go close to the vineyard. So therefore, it's yain nesach. This is him pouring is very close to him mixing it. Turmason, these beans, why? Because they're not b'nei Torah. Ha b'nei Torah shari, what? So Talmid Chachamim are allowed to have beans from a non-Jewish restaurant. If you can eat it raw, then there's no bishul akum. You have to cook it big time. So therefore, it should be bishul akum. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan no, Rabbi Yochanan argues. And this is how we paskin. If it doesn't go on the table of a king doesn't eat these beans. Lechel bois pass, eat it together with the bread. Ein boy mishum That's not a type of food that we are concerned about. If they're Talmidei Chachamim, they don't know how to differentiate between this food, that food. Does it go on the Shulchan Aruch? Not great. But Amaritzim, they don't know anything. So we got to make a loy plug for them and say everything is also even the Termisen. Go back to that city, tell them that their kids are mamzerim, that the wine is yain nesach, and the beans are bishulakim. Toner Rabbana. And here we go with the machlokes, the three-way machlokes. What do you need to do in order to become a ger? Ger shemal v'loy taval. He did one of the two. He did bris milah, the harder of the two. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Hareze ger. He's considered a ger. Rabbi said, when we came out of Mitzrayim, we're talking about Pesach and coming out of Mitzrayim. When we came out of Mitzrayim, we weren't Yidden yet. What were we? We're Bnei Noach. So how do we get from Bnei Noach to be Jewish? You have to take a step. You have to take physical action. So in the time of the Midbar of Mitzrayim, they had bris milah. They had bris milah, but they didn't have tefillah. So just to refresh everybody's memory, Klal Yisrael didn't want to do milah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this carbon Pesach of Moshe Rabbeinu smell like the smell of Olam Haba. It was unbelievable. They couldn't control themselves, and they wanted that. And they said, how can I get that? How can I get that carbon? So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Oh, you have to bring a carbon Pesach, but in order to bring a carbon Pesach, you have to do a bris milah." And that's what we say, the two bloods, the blood of the bris milah and the blood of the carbon Pesach, they go together. And that happened now, right before Pesach. Says the Gemara, so we find we can't be better than them, and they did bris milah, and they don't need tefillah, he says. Memela, you don't need it to be toivel. One out of the two things, a ger, in order to become a ger, you need a bris milah. Toval v'lo imal. What if he did the other one of the two? In other words, he did tefillah, he didn't do milah. Well, the wives of those men in Mitzrayim, obviously they couldn't get a bris milah. So what did they do to take action? They must have taken action, and the only other thing that we know of is tefillah. So you see that tefillah alone without a bris milah works. And finally, the third shita, when the Gemara is going to tell us that it's not a rabbim like we think it is, it's one individual named Rabbi Yossi. You must do both. You need to do bris milah, you need to do tefillah if you're a man. Says Gemara, Rabbi Yeshua nami neilef ma'avos. Why doesn't Rabbi Yeshua learn from the forefathers that milah is enough? Rabbi Eliezer nami neilef ma'avos. Learn from the mothers that tefillah is enough. But how can you learn from a woman? A woman cannot possibly have a bris milah. So how are you going to learn from her? Says Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer omer minayin lepesach raboisai. We're in Pesach, and the Gemara mentions Pesach. Minayin lepesach doros. How do you know that forever, all generations, you don't bring a carbon Pesach from Meiser Sheni? What does that mean? So let's just go through it real quickly in case you just joined the daf and you don't know this by heart. If a person has produce, he gives 2% to Truma. He gives 10% to the Levi. That's called Meiser Rishon. And after that, step three is really the Levi gives to we're talking about his step 3, which over here in the chart is step 4. So it depends. On year 1, 2, 4, 5, he gives Meiser Sheni. He takes 10% of all his produce and he brings it to Yerushalayim. But if he doesn't want to schlep hundreds and thousands of pounds of produce to Yerushalayim, he transfers it into cash and then he pays a little bit of a penalty, whatever, but at the end of the day, he has cash, and he brings that cash to Yerushalayim. And what does he do with that cash? He buys whatever he feels like buying. He buys steaks. He goes to the restaurant. Can he purchase with that money a carbon Pesach? A carbon Pesach is food. I'm going to eat it on the Seder night. The answer is no. He cannot. How do I know? Minay in the Pesach Dor Shein Bo Elo Menachulin. It has to come out of your bank account, from your pocket. It can't be from Ma'aser Sheni money. Nemer Pesach b'Mitzrayim and Nemer Pesach b'Doros. It says the Korban Pesach the first time and then later on. Ma Pesach Omer b'Mitzrayim Ein Bo Elo Menachulin. They purchase it with their own money. Pesach Omer l'Doros Ein Bo Elo Menachulin. It's not fair. How can you learn halacha from Yitzias Mitzrayim? There was no Ma'aser Sheni yet in those days. Even you're right, even though you can't. No. Nevertheless, we can learn from it. So too, I can learn from a woman that tvila, going to the mikvah alone, is enough to become a giyaris. So too for a man. A woman cannot have a bris milah. You're right, but I still can learn from her. We just turned to Amud Beis, sponsored by Moshe Yakov, in honor of Jolly Joe Kraus and family. And I forgot. I don't have a printer. So I don't have the other sponsor. So whatever. Maybe Yosef will do some magic. Sponsor is Zechus from Moshe Yakov ben Shoshana, and both Ruchnis and Gashmis. Says the Gemara, if there was a tefillah but no milah, kulam lo pligi de mahani. Watch, my father-in-law is going to march in here in 2 minutes, kick us all out. You saw him already? You told him that is a shit? No. Maybe tell him. I don't know if he might be surprised. He comes early. He's the official Magachir here in the hotel. I was not surprised at all when in the schedule of the hotel it says the Daf Yomi shir by the famous Dr. Mike Givaldik. He's been doing it for 26 years. Why not? So if he did a tvila, and by the way, as I said it, I'm going to say it again. His ideas here. You know what? They're right in front of me. This is what I learned from him. These are his charts. I don't know if you can see it. For years, he's been doing these charts on the whole sugya. Look at this, one by one. And I learned that idea from him. I got to say, I stole a page, literally stole a page out of his book. Bring those over here, Shlomo. Bring them and come over here. You got to see his character. He doesn't have cartoons, so let me show you how. Yo, come to the camera for a second. You also want to come to the camera. What is this? What is this?
Mother-in-law.
This is the mother-in-law. This is Shkoyach Tzadik. Well, hold on. So if the son-in-law went to the mother-in-law, and the ger had a son, so what happens is, okay, Shkoyach, we better collect these quickly because he's not going to have a share to give. Okay, here we go. Shkoyach. Fine. I'm messing around there. He's going to come in any second. But anyways, no. Kol hakavod lo. So if he did a tefillah without a milah, everybody agrees. Kulam lo pligi de mahani. See here, since we're learning from a woman, you see, a woman could become a giyaris just from going to the mikvah. So a man also. Ki pligi, so where's the machlokes? Ki pligi b'mal v'loy tavel. Stam, interesting thing. I don't know if it's 100% true. I need to find this out maybe before I say it. I'll just throw it out into the olam. Nobody's listening anyway. I understand that in the Israeli army, they start you at a 97 because the milah takes off 3 points. That's what I understand. Everybody's a 97. Maybe women also, like plug kind of thing, they also start at 97. But I think it's because of bris milah. I'm not 100% sure, but that kach shamati. Maybe that's what they say in the cheder. I have no idea. Rebbe says, look, our forefathers, they didn't go to the mikvah. They just did a milah. No, what are you talking about? Who told you they didn't go to the mikvah? They went to the mikvah. How does Rabbi Shua know that they went to the mikvah? Oh, it says by Matan Torah, it doesn't say go to the mikvah, but it says you should wash your clothes. If a person is tamei, carry, he doesn't dunk his clothes in the mikvah, he dunks his body in the mikvah. So if you have to dunk your clothes in the mikvah, certainly you should have to dunk your body in the mikvah. It's a kavachaymer. Again, if in a place where you dunk your body and not your clothing, that's the way it works. In other words, your body is less chomer, so certainly if you have to dunk your clothing, certainly you have to dunk your body. So in the time of Matan Torah, where it says chipsu sim loisam, you should put your clothing in a mikvah. Doesn't really say that. It says clean your clothing. That's what it means l'chayra. So you should put your body also. Says Gemara, who told you the chipsu sim loisam means the halach of tefillah from Tumah? Maybe it means simply, if you are going to receive the Torah, when you go to a bar mitzvah, you go to a wedding, you put on a nice fresh suit. So when you go to be mekabel the Torah, you're going to put on your best clothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling you, clean your clothing. Don't come dirty to my Matan Torah. Elamach. Vayikach Moshe's hadam vayizroik al ha'am. So this is really for context. Here. Pasuk Hey, just to understand what's going on here for a second. Pasuk Hey says, V'yalu oilos, Klal Yisrael, before Matan Torah, they brought oilos, Vayizbechu zvachim, and they brought zvachim shlamim. Pasuk Vav, Vayikach Moshe chatzi adam, he took from the blood of those oilos, zvachim shlamim, Vayosem ba'agonos, and he put it in vessels, and then in Pasuk Ches it says, Vayikach Moshe's adam. I'm just trying to explain where this blood came from. Is it from the Korban Pesach? No. It's from, they had a mizbeach and they were bringing karbanos. Vayizrok ala'am. He took from that blood and he sprinkled it on Klal Yisrael. Ugimiri de'ena zo b'lei tefillah, and we know there's a klal that you don't sprinkle blood without going to the mikveh first. Rabbi Yeshua tefillah b'mois menon. How does Rabbi Yeshua know that that our mothers that left Mitzrayim and Pesach, they went to the mikveh? Listen to this. Svaro, it must be logic. You must do something physical. Yiddishkeit, yes, once you're a Yid, it's all in the head. But to become a Yid, you can't become a Yid in your head. You have to do a physical thing. So Rabbi Yochanan holds you need two, like we said before, Tvila and Mila. Pshita, Yocheved, Rabim, Aloch Kerabim. We had a 3-year machlokes. We had a shita that says Reb Shua, we had a shita that says Mila, and we had a shita that says Tvila. And then we had Chachamim who say you need both Tvila and Mila. So who's going to win? Chachamim, the Rabbim. No, says the Gemara. In fact, that Chachamim is only one person. Man Chachamim Rabbi Yosi. It's only an individual. The Sanya. If a convert, a ger, comes and says, I did Mila, but I didn't do Tefillah. What's the big deal? You can do Tefillah. Why? Because Rebbe says, L'chayra, we don't know exactly what he says, but one of the two is enough. So if he did Mila, it's enough. No, you cannot do Tefillah. You can't trust him that he did Mila. Mila is not enough. I need to see the Mila. Yes, you're right. He has a bris Mila right now, but maybe he did the Mila not Lishma. Maybe an Arab gave him the Mila. Maybe he did it for another reason. That's not a good enough raya. The Fichach. Madbilin ger b'Shabbos. You hear this? Because Tvila, Mila, if I know for a fact that he did Mila and it's a good Mila, according to Rabbi Yosi, that's enough. I'm sorry. It's not enough. You need both. But Madbilin, Lefichach, Madbilin, ein Madbilin, Lefichach, Madbilin ger b'Shabbos. So, if we know that he's a ger, then he could do tefillah. If we don't know he's a ger, then he can't. There was a Maisa. I just want to say this real quickly because my sponsors come. 10 minutes, fine. Maisa Shaya, true story. Think about this for a second. It's a riddle. They did a gerus tagai right before Shabbos, and then when Shabbos came in, they were going back and forth. What should we do? Is he a ger, not a ger? So there's a problem because if he's not a ger, then he's not allowed to keep Shabbos. And if he is a ger, he must keep Shabbos. So what does he do? It's a dilemma. If the ger, they had a big suffix. We're going to do it again. We're going to do a little bit of a tafas dam on the Mila. We'll go back to the mikvah on Sunday. But today on Shabbos, what do we do? So they came up with a Givaldik Chap. I don't remember which Rav it was, but a true story. They told him to wear tzitzis and go into the Rosh Hashanah. Now, if he's a Yid, then the tzitzis are part of his beged, so he wasn't carrying. But if he's a guy, then the strings have nothing to do with the beged. He doesn't want those strings, so he's carrying in Rosh Hashanah. That's based on the halacha and Shabbos that if some of the strings rip, so your tzitzis are not tzitzis, then you are carrying those strings as a yid in the Rishus Harab. Anyway, I thought it was a cool chap. But anyways, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda says that you could be toivel ger on Shabbos. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds you don't need the tefillah. The tefillah doesn't add anything. He's already a ger with the bris milah. So a guy comes in with a bris milah, he's a ger. So by me giving him a tefillah, it doesn't do anything. I already know that he's a ger. You're not allowed to fix something on Shabbos. You're not allowed to create something on Shabbos. By you creating a yid, making a goy into yid, that's asur. But he's already a yid. He had a milah. So you put him in the mikvah, big deal. You cannot put him in the mikvah. Why? Because by you putting him in the mikvah, since he needs the tefillah to become a yid, by you putting him in the mikvah, you are creating something. Pshita. So what's the big chiddush? If you hold that tefillah doesn't do anything, so of course you can put him in the mikvah. Says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda says one of the two is enough. I would think, says the Gemara, that according to Rav Yehuda, the tefillah going to the mikvah is the main thing. So you cannot put him in the mikvah. So, according to Rav Yehuda, milah is okay. But maybe tefillah is even better than milah. And if he doesn't have milah, then just put him in the mikvah, and that's okay. So I think that you cannot do it on Shabbos. One of the two is also not good, according to Rav Yehuda. Anyone, milah, tefillah. So you have a guy, a guy, never had a bris milah. He wants to go to the mikvah on Shabbos. It's not okay. Because if he goes to the mikvah on Shabbos, he just became a ger. Kamash malon, the Rav Yehuda, oiha boy. So, sorry, messed it up. About the same, the Rav Yehuda tefillah ikar, utfillah b'Shabbos, loy, the kamasakin gavra. Kamash malon, the Rav Yehuda, oiha boy. Therefore, according to Rav Yehuda, one or the other. So if he came already with a bris, so we don't say, the tefillah is the ikr, and you shouldn't put him in the mikvah. He already has a bris, so he's 100% the ger. All you need is one of the two, either tefillah or milah. So what was the situation? He came to us already with a milah, so he's already a yid. So you could put him in the mikvah. Why? Because the mikvah doesn't add even one iota. Don't think that the mikvah is the main thing, and by you putting him in there, you added something? Nothing. Zog the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi, Eimad Bilan. Rabbi Yossi says you need both. What's the chiddush pshita? Of course you can't put him in the mikvah on Shabbos because you just created a ger by putting him in the mikvah. So that's the question. You can't fix him, so what's the chiddush that you can't put him in the mikvah? No. At the end of the day, milah is the main thing. And if it's the main thing, you could put him in the mikvah. It doesn't hurt. Maybe over there, since the milah wasn't in front of us, so maybe it wasn't l'shma, again, an Arab did or whatever. That's why you cannot put him in the mikvah if you don't know what the milah is. But if I know for a fact that the milah was a good milah, maybe Ema Lizbal Zeb Shabsa, so let him go to the mikvah, even according to Rabbi Yossi. Kamash Malon, the Rabbi Yossi Tarde Boy. No. You see, for me, Rabbi Yossi needs both, and therefore, even if he had a milah b'fanenu, we know for a fact it's a good milah, you can't put him in the mikvah, because that putting him in the mikvah is going to make him a ger gomor, and that's asur on Shabbos. Amar Rabbi. There was a story. Big doilim were there. There was a story. A ger came, he did the milah, he didn't do the tefillah. Scared of water. So it was nighttime. So he said, wait until tomorrow morning and we're going to do tefillah. You have a bris milah, great, that's one. We need two. Shema minot class. So from this story we see three things. And these are halachas that we're very familiar with, But we learn from this story. Right? Everybody knows, I think everybody knows, that by the gerus, you never knew you need 3 people. Okay? You did a chalitza. We have a guy that did a chalitza. He, in this room, he did a chalitza by himself. He had to do chalitza. Rahman al-Slan, his brother, was nifter at a very, how old was your brother when he was nifter? 20 something, no? 26. And Reb Hillel Bain had to do chalitza. But you know that yesterday they sent me a picture of a chalitza, so they beat you to it. You should have sent me yours. You have the video, everything? You have video? Send it, because the video they sent was very schwach. Okay, so anyway, let's finish up because he's coming in 2 minutes. He's probably outside already. So we see from here 3 halachas. First of all, in order to be a ger, you need 3 dayanim. You need both. Because they told him, come back tomorrow for the tefillah. So the meal is not enough, you need tefillah as well. You cannot do the tefillah at night. Says Gemara, look at the G'dolim here. And this. So you see, you need professionals. So says the Gemara, from this, not a raya, dilma diklau. Those, they happen to be there. Doesn't mean you need them. Why? Mishpat ksiv bey, and therefore you're required to have 3. Rabboisai, have a wonderful day. Remember, today's Yontif, tomorrow's Yontif. Forget about the shopping. Forget about going to work. It's not important to work on Yontif. It's not important to shop on Yontif. I know the sales. I know all the Zechus. Forget about it. Have a wonderful Gewaldige day. Tell my Shreya to come in, please.